The security camera footage showed 3 men breaking into her bakery at 2 in the morning, and Tessa Zimmerman knew she needed help before they came back for more than just cash. She sat in the police station at dawn, exhausted and shaking, watching the detective rewind the tape for the 4th time. Her small neighborhood bakery, Sweet Mornings, had been her dream for 5 years, built from nothing with her own savings and countless sleepless nights perfecting recipes. Now those same men knew her schedule, her routine, and worst of all, they knew she worked alone most mornings. "Miss Zimmerman, I strongly recommend you hire private security," Detective Morrison said, sliding a business card across his desk. "These guys are part of a crew that's been hitting small businesses in the area. They usually come back." Tessa stared at the card, her stomach twisting. "I can barely afford my rent. How am I supposed to pay for a bodyguard? There are affordable options. This agency works on sliding scales." He tapped the card. "Call them today." She left the station as the sun rose over Seattle, casting long shadows across the wet pavement. The morning felt different now, threatening instead of peaceful. Every stranger on the street made her pulse quicken. She'd always loved the quiet solitude of her early morning baking routine, arriving at 4 to start the bread. But now the thought of being alone in that kitchen terrified her. At the bakery, her assistant manager, Donna, was already fielding questions from concerned regulars who'd seen the police tape. Tessa forced smiles and reassuring words while her hands trembled measuring flour. By noon, she'd made the call to the security agency, her voice barely steady as she explained her situation and her extremely limited budget. "I understand," the woman on the phone said kindly. "Let me see what we can do. Can you come in tomorrow at 10? The next morning, Tessa dressed in her nicest jeans and a clean sweater, trying to look professional despite the dark circles under her eyes. The security agency occupied a modest office in a downtown building, nothing fancy but clean and organized. She sat in the waiting room, bouncing her knee anxiously and mentally calculating how much she could possibly afford to pay someone to shadow her through her days. "Miss Zimmerman." A woman in her 50s appeared, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia Reeves. Come on back." In the small office, Patricia pulled up Tessa's file on her computer. "So I've reviewed your case and your financial situation. I'm going to be honest with you, most of our guards charge rates you can't afford. However, we do have one option that might work." Tessa leaned forward, hopeful. "We have someone well, he's unusual. He doesn't do this for the money. He actually volunteers his time through our program for people in situations like yours. He's extremely qualified, maybe overqualified honestly, but he has his own reasons for wanting to help." "What's the catch?" Tessa asked warily. "No catch. He's former military, highly trained, and he's good at what he does. His name is Sebastian York, and he can start tomorrow if you're interested." The relief that flooded through Tessa was so intense she almost cried. "Yes, absolutely yes." Sebastian York arrived at Sweet Mornings at 3:45 the next morning, 15 minutes before Tessa was scheduled to open up. She spotted him immediately when she turned onto her street, a tall figure leaning against the bakery's brick wall, hands in the pockets of a dark jacket, utterly still in a way that suggested complete awareness of everything around him. As she approached, her keys clutched tight, he straightened. "Miss Zimmerman." His voice was deep calm. "Sebastian York." "Tessa, please," she managed, getting her first good look at him under the streetlight. He was probably in his early 30s with dark hair and sharp features that looked carved rather than formed. His eyes were an intense gray that seemed to catalog every detail about her in seconds. Everything about him radiated control and capability. "Thank you for doing this. I know you're volunteering, and I just want you to know how grateful I am." Don't mention it. He gestured toward the bakery door. Let's get you inside safely. From now on, I arrive before you and I leave after you. I'll be with you during business hours and I'll escort you home each night. She unlocked the door with shaking hands, hyper-aware of his presence behind her as they entered the dark bakery. He moved past her immediately, flipping on lights and walking through the entire space with practiced efficiency, checking the back door, the storage room, the small bathroom. Satisfied, he returned to find her still standing by the front entrance, frozen. "It's clear," he said gently. "You can start your day." Tessa nodded and moved to the kitchen, tying on her apron and trying to fall into her familiar routine. But everything felt different with Sebastian there, standing near the kitchen doorway where he could watch both her and the front windows. She fumbled with her measuring cups, dropped a bag of sugar, and completely forgot the ratio for her signature cinnamon bread. "I'm sorry," she said after her third mistake. "I'm not usually this scattered." "You're dealing with trauma," Sebastian said matter-of-factly. "Give yourself time to adjust." Something about his straightforward acknowledgement of what she was feeling made her breathe easier. She focused on the bread, letting the familiar motion soothe her. As she worked, she snuck glances at her new bodyguard. He stood with military posture, his attention constantly moving, but there was something restful about his presence. He didn't fidget or check his phone or try to make small talk. He simply did his job with complete focus. When Donna arrived at 6, she stopped short at the sight of Sebastian. "Who's the tall drink of water?" "Donna, this is Sebastian York. He's providing security for a while." Tessa pulled a tray of croissants from the oven. "Sebastian, this is Donna Walsh, my assistant manager and the reason this place doesn't fall apart." "Madam," Sebastian nodded respectfully. Donna looked between them with obvious curiosity, but was smart enough not to pry with him standing right there. As the morning rush began, Sebastian moved to a position near the register where he could watch everyone who entered. Tessa noticed how customers' eyes slid to him, lingered, then moved on. He had a way of being simultaneously noticeable and non-threatening, though she suspected anyone with bad intentions would pick up on the danger he represented. During the mid-morning lull, she brought him a coffee and a still warm cinnamon roll. "You must be hungry." "Thank you." He accepted both, and she caught the smallest hint of surprise in his expression. "You didn't have to do that. You're protecting me for free. It's the least I can do." She leaned against the counter beside him, suddenly curious. "Can I ask why you do this?" "The volunteer security thing." Sebastian took a sip of coffee before answering. "I needed something to do with my time that mattered. This matters." It wasn't much of an answer, but something in his tone told her not to push. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the street outside, until the lunch crowd began trickling in. The days fell into a pattern. Sebastian arrived before dawn, cleared the bakery, and stayed until Tessa locked up at 7 each evening. He walked her to her car, followed her home to her small apartment, and checked inside before leaving her for the night. He didn't talk much, but his presence was constant and reassuring. Tessa found herself sleeping better, the nightmares about the break-in becoming less frequent. A week into their arrangement, a man came into the bakery who made Sebastian's entire posture change. Tessa felt it before she saw it, a sudden sharpening of attention. The man was in his 20s, wearing an expensive leather jacket, and his eyes swept the bakery with clear calculation. "Help you?" Donna asked from the register. "Just looking." The man's gaze landed on Tessa in the kitchen doorway, held a moment too long, then moved to Sebastian. Whatever he saw there made him turn and leave without another word. "That was one of them," Tessa whispered, her heart hammering. "From the security footage, I know." Sebastian was already on his phone, speaking quietly to someone. When he hung up, he looked at her with complete calm. "Detective Morrison is sending a unit by. He won't be back." "How did you know?" His body language, the way he was casing the place, and the fact that he left the moment he saw me. Sebastian moved closer, his voice lowering. "Tessa, you're safe, I promise you that." She believed him. More than that, she realized with a start that she trusted him completely. This quiet man who'd appeared in her life just over a week ago. That evening, after the police had come and gone with a promise to increase patrols in the area, Sebastian walked Tessa to her car as usual. The November air was crisp, rain threatening. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for so much more than just today. "I don't know what I would have done without you here. You would have been fine. You're stronger than you think." He opened her car door, "But I'm glad I could help." As she drove home, his words stayed with her. No one had called her strong in a long time. Most people saw her as sweet, nice, the girl who made good cupcakes. Sebastian saw something different over the following weeks. Something shifted between them. It was subtle at first. Sebastian accepting her offer of lunch, sharing brief stories about his time in the army, asking about her journey to opening the bakery. Tessa learned he'd served 2 tours overseas, that he'd grown up in Montana, that he had a dry sense of humor that appeared unexpectedly and made her laugh. "Why did you leave the military?" she asked one quiet afternoon, immediately adding, "Sorry, you don't have to answer that. It's all right. I had family obligations that required me to come home." He was quiet for a moment. "My father died and left some things I needed to handle." "I'm sorry about your father." "Don't be. We weren't close." Sebastian's expression was unreadable, but there were responsibilities I couldn't ignore. Tessa wanted to ask more, but sensed the conversation had reached its limit. Instead, she told him about her own father, who'd taught her to bake when she was 7, who'd believed in her dream of owning a bakery even when everyone else told her it was too risky. He died 3 years ago, just months before she'd signed the lease on Sweet Mornings. "He would have loved this place," she said softly. "He would have been proud of you," Sebastian replied, and the certainty in his voice made her throat tight. As December approached, Tessa began decorating the bakery for Christmas. Sebastian helped her hang lights and garland without being asked, his height making it easy to reach the high spots. Donna watched them work together with barely concealed amusement. "What?" Tessa finally asked when Donna's smile became too obvious to ignore. "Nothing at all," Donna said innocently. "Just nice to see you happy again." Was she happy? Tessa considered this as she handed Sebastian another string of lights. Yes, she realized. Despite everything that had happened, she was happy. The fear from the break-in had faded, replaced by confidence that came from knowing Sebastian was there. But it was more than just feeling safe. She looked forward to seeing him each morning, to their quiet conversations, to the way he noticed things about her that no one else did, like how she chewed her lip when she was worried about a new recipe, or how she always saved the last chocolate croissant for Mrs. Henderson, who came in every afternoon. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He'd finished with the lights and was watching her with those sharp gray eyes. "Nothing, just glad we're doing this." She gestured at the decorations. "It looks good. Festive." He almost smiled. "Though I'm not sure about that snowman." She swatted his arm playfully without thinking, then froze, suddenly aware of the solid muscle beneath his shirt. He went still too, and for a moment something passed between them, undefined but definitely there. Donna's voice broke the moment. "I'm heading out unless you need anything else." "No, go ahead. Thanks for today." Tessa busied herself straightening already straight ornaments. After Donna left, the bakery felt smaller with just the 2 of them. Sebastian began his evening routine of checking the locks and setting the security system, but something felt different tonight. Charged. Tessa, he said as she gathered her things. Would you want to grab dinner? She looked up, surprised. Like right now? Yes. There's a good Italian place 2 blocks from here. My treat. He seemed slightly uncertain, which was so unlike his usual confidence that it made her heart skip. I'd love that. The restaurant was small and warm, red checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. They settled into a corner booth, and Tessa realized this was the first time they'd been somewhere together outside of the bakery. It felt significant, like a line being crossed. Over pasta and red wine, their conversation flowed easier than ever. Sebastian told her about growing up on a ranch, about his mother who'd passed when he was young, about his best friend from his unit who was getting married next summer. Tessa shared stories about culinary school, about the dozen banks that had rejected her loan application before one finally said yes, about her dream of one day having multiple locations. You'll do it, Sebastian said with complete conviction. You're good at what you do and you care about it. That combination is rare. What about you? What do you want to do? I mean, besides the volunteer security work. Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to interpret. I have some business interests I've been neglecting, things I should probably pay more attention to. What kind of business? Investments mostly. Property management. It's not very interesting. He changed the subject smoothly. Tell me about your signature cinnamon bread. What makes it special? She let him redirect the conversation but filed away his vagueness for later consideration. As they walked back to their cars after dinner, Sebastian's hand brushed hers and she boldly took it. His fingers closed around hers immediately, warm and solid. This okay? She asked. More than okay, he said quietly. That night, he walked her to her apartment as always, but at her door he lingered. They stood in the hallway, still holding hands, neither wanting to say good night. I should tell you something, Sebastian began, his expression serious. This wasn't supposed to happen. Tessa's stomach dropped. What wasn't? Me caring about you, getting involved. I'm supposed to be your security, that's it. Professional distance. He looked at their joined hands. But I can't seem to manage that with you. Relief and joy flooded through her. I don't want you to manage it. I care about you too, Sebastian. I have for weeks now. He lifted his free hand to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. I need to be honest with you about some things, about who I am. Okay, she whispered, leaning into his touch, but not tonight. Tonight I just want to do this. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, before his lips met hers in a kiss that made her knees weak. It was gentle but intense, full of carefully controlled feeling, and when they broke apart she was breathless. Wow, she managed. The corner of his mouth lifted in the closest thing to a smile she'd seen from him. Yeah, wow. They stood there a moment longer before he forced himself to step back. I'll see you in the morning. 3:45, she confirmed, already counting the hours. That kiss changed everything and nothing. At the bakery, Sebastian remained professional, but now there were stolen glances and brief touches when no one was looking. The awareness between them was constant, electric. Donna noticed immediately. Finally, she said to Tessa during an afternoon lull. I thought you two were going to dance around each other forever. Is it that obvious? Honey, the man looks at you like you hung the moon. It's been obvious for weeks. Had it really? Tessa thought back over the past month, seeing their interactions in a new light. The way Sebastian always made sure she ate lunch, how he'd learned her coffee order without asking, the time he'd shown up with cold medicine when she'd been sniffling. All those small gestures that she'd thought were just kindness, had they been more? That evening, Sebastian suggested another dinner, this time at a steakhouse downtown. Tessa wore a dress for the first time since he'd known her, and the look on his face when she emerged from her apartment made the effort worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Over dinner, Sebastian seemed to be working up to something. He'd order his thoughts, start to speak, then stop. Finally, as their dessert arrived, he set down his fork and looked directly at her. "I need to tell you the truth about something, and I'm worried it's going to change how you see me." Tessa's heart began to race. "What is it?" "I haven't been entirely honest about why I volunteer as a security guard or about my situation." He took a breath. "The truth is, I don't need to work at all. I'm wealthy, Tessa, very wealthy." She blinked, processing this. "How wealthy?" "Billionaire wealthy. My father owned York Industries, manufacturing, real estate, tech investments. When he died, I inherited everything." The restaurant suddenly felt too small. Tessa's mind raced, trying to reconcile this information with the man sitting across from her, the one who'd spent the last 6 weeks guarding her bakery for free. "I don't understand. Why would you pretend to be a volunteer security guard?" "I wasn't pretending. I really do volunteer through that agency. After my father died and I left the military, I came back to Seattle and realized I didn't know what to do with myself. I had all this money, all these companies to run, but it felt meaningless. I was sitting in board meetings thinking about how I used to have a purpose in the army, how I used to protect people." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "So I started volunteering. The security work gave me something real to do, something that actually helped people instead of just moving money around. You could have told me. I know, but people treat you differently when they know you have money. They either want something from you or they see you as just a bank account. I liked that you saw me as just Sebastian, just a guy doing a job." Tessa sat back, trying to organize her feelings. On one hand, she understood his reasoning. On the other, it felt like a significant omission. "What made you decide to tell me now?" "Because this is becoming something real between us, and I can't let it go further without you knowing the truth about who I am." His gray eyes were steady on hers. "I'm Sebastian York, CEO of York Industries, worth about $3 billion according to the last Forbes estimate. But I'm also the man who's fallen for a baker who makes the best cinnamon rolls I've ever tasted and who lights up every room she walks into." The frustration that had been building in Tessa's chest eased. "You've fallen for me, completely. That's the other thing I needed to tell you." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I've fallen for you too, and I don't care about the money, Sebastian. I care about the man who shows up at 3:45 every morning to make sure I'm safe. The one who listens when I talk about bread like it's the most important thing in the world. The one who puts up Christmas lights and talks to Mrs. Henderson about her grandchildren." She squeezed his fingers. "That's who you are to me." The relief on his face was palpable. "I was terrified you'd be angry." "I'm not angry. A little overwhelmed maybe, but not angry." She paused. "Though I do feel guilty that you've been working for free when you could have been doing actual CEO things. The CEO things will still be there. And I wasn't working for free, I was spending time with you. That's payment enough." They finished dessert in a new kind of peace. The air cleared between them. On the drive back to her apartment, Tessa found herself thinking about what this meant. Sebastian wasn't just some former soldier volunteering his time. He was one of the wealthiest men in Seattle, someone who operated in a completely different world than she did. "I can hear you thinking," Sebastian said as he parked in front of her building. "Just processing." Inside her apartment, he did his usual security check before settling on her couch. It was the first time he'd stayed beyond just clearing the rooms, and Tessa liked having him in her space. She made tea and curled up beside him. "Tell me about your world," she said. "The CEO stuff. I want to understand that part of your life." So he told her about York Industries, about the manufacturing plants that employed thousands, the real estate holdings across 3 states, the venture capital fund that invested in startups. He spoke matter-of-factly, without boasting, and Tessa could tell he viewed it more as a responsibility than an achievement. "It's a lot," she said when he finished. "It is. But I have good people running most of it day to day. I mostly handle big decisions and long-term strategy." He looked at her carefully. "Does it bother you, the money?" "No, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't intimidating. We're from very different worlds, Sebastian." "Are we, though? I grew up on a ranch in Montana until I was 13. My father built his fortune from nothing, and he made sure I understood the value of work. I joined the Army instead of going straight into the company specifically because I didn't want to be just some rich kid." He turned to face her fully. "I'm just a person, Tessa. The money is just a circumstance." She believed him because she'd seen who he really was over the past 6 weeks. The money didn't change the fact that he was kind and honorable and made her feel safer than she'd ever felt. "Okay," she said simply. "Okay, okay, let's do this. Let's see where this goes." His kiss was her answer, deeper than the first one, full of promise. They stayed wrapped up in each other on her couch until late, talking and kissing and learning each other. When he finally left, Tessa floated to bed, her mind full of possibilities. The next few weeks were like living in a dream. Sebastian continued his security work at the bakery, but now they were openly together. He'd steal kisses in the kitchen between customers, keep his hand on her back as they walked to her car, tell her she was beautiful with flour in her hair. Tessa had never been happier. He also began introducing her to his actual life. A charity gala where she wore a borrowed designer dress and met Seattle's elite. A tour of York Industries headquarters where she saw him in a suit commanding a boardroom. Dinner at restaurants she'd never even heard of. It was overwhelming but exciting, and Sebastian made sure she never felt out of place, always keeping her close and making it clear she was what mattered to him, not the setting. In return, she brought him fully into her world. He helped her test new recipes, his honest feedback proving invaluable. He charmed her regular customers and won over Mrs. Henderson completely when he carried her groceries to her car. He even convinced her to let him invest in the bakery not as a takeover, but as a partner who believed in her vision. "I don't want your money," Tessa protested when he first suggested it. "It's not about the money. It's about helping you achieve your dreams faster." He showed her the business plan he'd drawn up. With the right investment, you could open a second location within a year, 3 locations within 2. You'd maintain creative control and majority ownership. I'd just be a silent partner providing capital. Looking at his projections, Tessa couldn't deny the opportunity he was offering. With his backing, she could expand without drowning in debt, could hire more staff, could finally implement all the ideas she'd been shelving due to budget constraints. "Why do you want to do this?" she asked. "Because I believe in you, and because making you happy makes me happy." She agreed, and within weeks they'd signed papers making Sebastian a 30% partner in Sweet Mornings. The money hit her business account, and suddenly she was shopping for a second location and interviewing potential new hires. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Through it all, Sebastian was her rock. He brought his business expertise without being controlling, offered suggestions without demanding she take them, celebrated her successes like they were his own. And every morning he still showed up at 3:45 to make sure she was safe, even though the men who'd broken in had been arrested and charged weeks ago. "You don't have to keep doing the security thing," Tessa told him one morning in early January. "I'm okay now. I know you're okay. But I like being here. Watching you work is the best part of my day." He pulled her close. Plus, someone needs to quality test all these pastries. She laughed against his chest, breathing in the scent of him. I love you, she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. He went very still, then pulled back to look at her face. Say that again. I love you, Sebastian York, billionaire, bodyguard, business partner, best person I've ever known. I love you too, he said fiercely. God, Tessa, I've been in love with you since you brought me that first cinnamon roll and looked at me like I was a person worth caring about. Their kiss was interrupted by Donna arriving and immediately backing out the door with an exaggerated cough. They broke apart laughing, and Tessa felt so full of joy she thought she might burst. As winter deepened into spring, their relationship deepened too. Sebastian brought her to Montana to see the ranch where he'd grown up, now maintained by a caretaker, but still beautiful with its wide skies and rolling land. Tessa understood him better after seeing where he came from, understanding the roots that had shaped him. I want to build something here, he told her as they stood on the porch of the old ranch house. Not just maintain it as a memory, but make it useful. Maybe a retreat for veterans or a working ranch that employs people who need a fresh start. That's a beautiful idea. I've been thinking about it since I left the army. Now, meeting you, watching you build something that matters, it made me realize I want that too. Not just managing my father's legacy, but creating something of my own. They spent the visit making plans, sketching out possibilities. Tessa loved seeing this side of Sebastian, passionate and engaged in a way he never was when talking about board meetings or quarterly reports. Back in Seattle, they fell into an easy rhythm. Sebastian split his time between York Industries and the bakery, finding balance between his two worlds. He was genuinely good at both, commanding respect in the boardroom and charming customers at sweet mornings with equal ease. Tessa opened her second location in March, a bigger space in a trendy neighborhood, and Sebastian was there for every step of the process. The grand opening was a massive success, with lines out the door and glowing reviews. As Tessa looked around at the crowded bakery, at Donna managing the staff with practiced efficiency, at Sebastian leaning against the counter watching her with obvious pride, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude for how far she'd come. That night, exhausted and happy, they collapsed on the couch in what had become their apartment. Sebastian had officially moved in 2 months ago, and Tessa couldn't imagine her home without him in it anymore. Proud of you, he murmured, pulling her against his side. Couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have, just would have taken longer. He kissed the top of her head. You're remarkable, you know that. She tilted her face up to kiss him properly. You're not so bad yourself. As spring turned to summer, Sebastian made good on his plans for the Montana ranch. He established the York Veterans Retreat, a place where former service members could come for respite and healing, with programs for PTSD treatment, job training, and agricultural therapy. He threw himself into the project with the same focus he'd once given to security work, and Tessa saw him come alive in a new way. Come with me to the opening, he said one evening in June. I want you there. So Tessa found herself back in Montana, standing beside Sebastian as he cut the ribbon on the retreat's main building. Watching him speak to the gathered veterans, many of them his former comrades, she saw the impact he was making. This was what he'd been searching for, a way to use his resources that felt meaningful. That night, as they lay in bed in the ranch house, Sebastian propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. I have something to ask you. Okay, she said, suddenly nervous at his serious tone. Move to Montana with me. Not permanently, we'd keep the apartment in Seattle, go back regularly to check on the bakeries, but make this our home base. You could open a location here, I could run the retreat, and we'd build a life together in the place that made me who I am. He cupped her face gently. "What do you think?" Tessa's mind raced. "Leave Seattle." But as she thought about it, the idea took hold. She'd been so focused on expanding in the city, but why not expand somewhere new? Montana had charm and a growing population. And more importantly, Sebastian was here in his element in a way he never quite was in Seattle. "Yes," she said, "let's do it." His smile was brilliant. Yeah, we'll figure out the logistics, but yes, I want to build a life with you here." They spent the rest of the summer making it happen. Tessa hired a general manager she trusted to oversee the Seattle locations while she split time between cities. She found a perfect spot in the town near the ranch for Sweet Mornings, Montana, a charming Main Street storefront that needed work but had good bones. Sebastian helped with renovations, and by September they were ready for a quiet opening. The Montana location had a different feel than the Seattle one's, more rustic, with local art on the walls and a menu that incorporated regional ingredients. It was an immediate hit with the community, and Tessa found herself falling in love with the slower pace and friendly faces. On their first anniversary of meeting, she counted from that first morning he'd shown up at the bakery, Sebastian took her horseback riding across the ranch at sunset. The autumn colors were spectacular, gold and red against the endless sky. "I have something for you," he said when they stopped at a high point overlooking the valley. Tessa turned to find him dismounting, then dropping to one knee in the grass. Her heart stopped. "Tessa Zimmerman, you walked into my life when I was lost, and you gave me purpose just by being yourself. You're brilliant and brave, and you make the best cinnamon rolls in the world." His gray eyes were soft with emotion. "I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, simple and elegant, a diamond that caught the fading light. Through tears, Tessa nodded. Yes, of course yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and stood to kiss her, and it felt like the world had aligned exactly as it should. They stayed on the hill until the stars came out, making plans and promises. They married the following spring in a simple ceremony at the ranch, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Donna served as Tessa's maid of honor. Several of Sebastian's army buddies stood up with him, and Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears through the whole ceremony. It was nothing like the society wedding Sebastian could have had, and that made it perfect. For their honeymoon, they drove across the country with no particular destination, stopping at small towns and interesting bakeries, Sebastian taking photos of Tessa in front of everything that made her smile. It was unhurried and romantic, a bubble of time just for them. When they returned to Montana, it was to news that Tessa was pregnant. The surprise quickly turned to joy, and Sebastian became immediately and adorably overprotective, insisting she rest more and let him handle the heavy lifting at the bakery. She indulged him because she knew it came from love. Their daughter was born in January, exactly 2 years after the morning Sebastian had first appeared outside Sweet Mornings. They named her Sarah, and she had Sebastian's gray eyes and Tessa's smile. Holding her for the first time, Sebastian cried, and Tessa fell even more in love with her husband, seeing him so tender with their tiny daughter. The years that followed were full and rich. Tessa expanded Sweet Mornings to 5 locations across Montana and Washington, each one carrying her signature touch. Sebastian grew the Veterans Retreat into a nationally recognized program, helping hundreds of former service members find their footing in civilian life. And together they raised Sarah, and 3 years later, her brother Samuel, on the ranch that had once been just a memory but was now very much a living home. On quiet mornings, Tessa would sometimes think back to that scared woman in the police station, desperate for help and protection. She never could have imagined then that hiring a bodyguard would lead to this, a full life, a thriving business, a family, and love that grew deeper every year. Sebastian still showed up early sometimes at whichever bakery location Tessa was working, standing in his familiar spot where he could watch both her and the doors. It was a habit he'd never quite broken, that need to make sure she was safe. But now he did it while holding Sarah's hand or with Samuel on his shoulders, and the sight of her family together in her bakery never failed to make Tessa's heart full. "What are you thinking about?" Sebastian asked one morning, catching her watching them. "Just how lucky I am," she said honestly. How a terrible thing led to the best thing. He crossed to her, their children trailing behind him, and pulled her close. "I'm the lucky one. I was just going through motions before you. You gave me a reason to be present in my own life." "We saved each other then," Tessa said. "Yeah," Sebastian agreed, kissing her softly. "We did." And in the bustling warmth of sweet mornings, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread and the sound of their children's laughter, Tessa knew that she'd found exactly what she'd been looking for all along, not just safety, but home. Not just a bodyguard, but a partner who guarded her heart as carefully as he'd once guarded her bakery, who built dreams alongside her, and who loved her with a steadiness that made everything else possible. The afternoon rush began, customers streaming in for their daily treats, and Tessa tied on her apron with Sebastian's help. He dropped a kiss on her neck before herding the kids to their favorite table, where he'd help them with coloring books while keeping one eye on Tessa. Always watching, always present, always hers. It was everything she'd never known to want, this life they'd built from a moment of fear, and a decision to trust a quiet stranger with gray eyes who'd promised to keep her safe. He'd kept that promise and so many more, and she knew with absolute certainty that he always would. They'd found each other in the darkness of her worst moment, and together they'd built something bright and lasting, something that would endure through whatever came next. Because that's what love was. Tessa had learned not just the feeling, but the daily choice to show up, to protect, to support, to build together. Sebastian had shown her that from the very first morning, and she'd spent every day since showing him the same. It was simple and profound, ordinary and extraordinary, and it was theirs. As the sun set over the Montana hills and the bakery glowed warm against the evening, Tessa looked at her husband helping their daughter frost a cupcake, at her son trying to sneak extra frosting, at the life they'd created, and knew that every moment had been worth it. Every fear overcome, every risk taken, every vulnerability shared, it had all led here, to this perfect, imperfect, beautiful life. And she wouldn't change a single thing.